thousands of, thank you, Katie, thousands of staff hours, as well as all the hours and feedback and everything that you all have provided to get us here. So we're super excited to be here. We hope you are too. And before we jump in, we're going to do another little virtual participation check. Next slide. So again, we've got the chat box open today, so please just ask any questions in the chat box. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question verbally or have a follow-up question, whatever else. You just click the, on the bottom of your screen somewhere it says participants. You click that and it'll bring a participant dialog box, and it'll have an option there where you can raise your hand. We are recording this meeting. We will post this recording to our website afterwards. So if there's something you missed or you want to go back to, you'll have that here in a couple days posted on the website. And this meeting is being captioned. So if you'd like the captions turned on, there's usually somewhere where it says other options, or there's 3 dots at the bottom of your screen. If you click that, you'll get the option to caption the meeting. And as we go through the questions, I'll just acknowledge that what we're doing here is we're capturing all the questions that are being asked. If it's more than a clarifying question or like a question pointing to something we've answered, we won't post that. But if it's a question we haven't answered or a clarification we haven't posted before, what we'll be doing is capturing that question, giving you an answer, and then also posting that to our website, to the Q&A section. So you can go back and track other questions that have been asked in previous webinars there as well. With that, this is a small crew, so feel free to turn on your videos if you want, but obviously you're welcome to not do that and just take advantage of sort of the space that we have here today. So just want to say thank you all for being here, and we'll move on to the next slide. And actually, maybe I should have said this. Well, next slide, Katie, sorry. We're going to start. We're going to pause here. I know that a handful of folks have entered their names and organization affiliations into the chat box, so please do that if you haven't. But I will also share my name. My name is Sam Barrasso, and I'm with the PCEF startup team, and would love to hear from others in the chat box. And we're going to also turn on a poll here in a second in order to get a little sense of the folks we have here with us today. So let me go ahead and I will launch the poll. Just a little question on, how much you've engaged in the RFP, so we can get a good sense of where folks are at. And as we're doing that, I just want to acknowledge some great reading suggestions. Appreciate getting a call out to Octavia Butler's work earlier. Michelle posted that you're checking out Revisionist History podcast. We've got The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. Thank you for that. And then we've got a whole host of other things here. Okay, we'll make sure some folks get that. So I'm going to close the poll out here. So it looks like most of the folks, almost all the people that responded to the poll here have read some of the RFP materials and are here to learn. So that's perfect for us. Let me share the results actually so you can see that. All right. So let's go to the next slide here. So I want to just start out with the guiding principles. The grant committee, which is our 9-person volunteer committee, which is the body that ultimately makes the final funding recommendations to City Council, developed these guiding principles to inform and guide the program whenever we had questions that came up to steer us. Now, these guiding principles describe the values by which the program is administered, but the guiding principles also complement our legislative code. This is the language that voters voted on back in November 2018. And so the guiding principles help us ensure that our decisions are being made in a way that aligns with the vision and values of the committee as well as the community. And we'll speak to a little bit more later on how we got to there. But at a high level, guiding principles are the program is justice-driven, community-powered, accountable, and it focuses on climate action with multiple benefits. Next slide. Now this slide just provides a quick orientation for folks who've already started reading the material. So I'm just going to skim over this real quickly, but at a high level, we've got these 4 funding allocations or funding categories, and these are called out within the initiative the largest of which is clean energy programs. These are energy efficiency and renewable energy investments in residential buildings and multifamily buildings, and in apartments, that's including multifamily, as well as in commercial buildings, industrial buildings, and schools. We've got contractor training and support and workforce development funds, and those are investments in workforce development, so making sure that those working in these clean energy jobs are more diverse, so that the folks working in these careers are more diverse, but also that the contractors with the opportunities to lead on doing these projects are also more diverse. So it's both about the workforce as well as the contractors. Then we've got about 10 to 15% in green infrastructure and regenerative ag. So this is about investments in things like street trees, green roofs, bioswales, or urban agriculture, community gardens, things that ultimately sequester carbon in soils. I think that's oftentimes the nexus we come back to, is the carbon in soils. And then the last bucket is innovation, and that's really sort of an other category. It's things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as create community benefit, but don't otherwise neatly fall into one of the other categories. And you'll see that this year we're pushing out $8.6 million of this solicitation, but it's important context to hold that next year and in future years, you'll see solicitations for 40 to 60 million. Slide. So just as a starting point, we just want to make sure folks all sort of get this clearly. Who are folks eligible to apply? You have to be an IRS tax exempt organization, so you have to be a registered nonprofit with Oregon Secretary of State. So generally, it's nonprofit organizations have to be the primary applicant, but we encourage and we expect them to partner with other nonprofits, other for-profits, and government. So it's just the primary applicant that is leading and has the contractual relationship with the city in PCEF will be a nonprofit organization. Now, the PCEF committee anticipated and expected there'd be many new groups that could be forming that wanted to address some of the issues that PCEF was designed to address. And so they do allow for nonprofit fiscal sponsors to sponsor those burgeoning groups. And we provide a little bit of guidance around what some new groups may want to look to as they think about fiscal sponsorship relationship. And so they still have to have charitable purposes, all this. It isn't meant to be a pass-through for private businesses, but it's about allowing new groups to start to be able to interact and engage with the program. And I should acknowledge these slides we will send out afterwards as well. So any link you see here in these slides, you will have after this presentation here today. Next slide. So this is just a prettier version, I think, of what you saw earlier, but also it's dialed down. These numbers reflect the categories you saw with the exception of innovation and general expectations around how much funding you should expect to see in each of these categories for year one. So of the 8.6 million available, we expect to fund 3.5 to 5 million for those clean energy investments, clean energy projects, 840,000 to about 1.3 million in green infrastructure, 1.7 to 2.1 million for workforce development and contractor support. These other numbers you see here on this page, and this is part of the RFP, is the allocations. So folks can apply for planning grants, small grants, as well as large grants. Planning grants are just that, planning grants, small grants, and large grants are implementation grants. But the committee made an initial allocation to set aside at least 1.5 million for planning grants. Let me see here. This may not be placed. Okay, so and the committee set aside at least 1.5 million for planning grants. So I won't spend too much more time on this. Next slide. So it's taken quite a bit to get here. I think we've got a small crew here, but I'll just acknowledge, I mean, through and through with PCEF from the very start, the way that we've implemented the program has always been about carrying through the intentions that were laid out with the passage of the initiative and the development of the initiative at the ballot and through the community. So it was a community-led initiative that was passed at the ballot in November 2018. We appointed a grant committee about a year afterwards, November 2019, a little less than a year ago from now. That committee itself is majority POC, majority women. We engaged in putting out for public comment our guiding principles to continue to collaborate with community and make sure throughout the way that we were hearing from community and incorporating everything that community wanted to see in what we were developing. We approved those, the committee approved those guiding principles in April. Through that time, they were working on the actual inaugural grant request for proposals, the questions, the scoring criteria, they put those out in June of 2020. We got a lot of great feedback from many of you, several of you on the call here today. And then we released the RFP in September 16th. We're here now, October 14th, almost halfway through the open RFP period, and it'll close on November 16th. Once it closes, we'll go through a review process, eligibility screening, technical review, as well as a scoring panel review, and then eventually deliberations with the full committee before they send their recommendations to City Council in February 2021 so that they can make a decision. Once we get out on that, the City Council award the first set of funds. We all celebrate, and then we gear up and redo this again for year 2 as we get ready to push out the 40 to 60 million. Okay. Next slide. So I think at this point in this, what we would love to get a sense for is just what kind of interest there is, with folks in the call here or on the planning, small and large grants, as well as your experience in applying for grants. So we're going to go ahead and launch this poll. And I want to acknowledge that here, this may be a place to mention that folks can apply for multiple planning grants, multiple small grants, multiple large grants, and you're not restricted to applying for one. Hope people are seeing this poll here. I'll give it another couple seconds here. Okay. So it looks like we've got a good level of interest across the planning, small and large grants, which feels good to us, in that we've captured we've at least designed an RFP process that is responsive, and we've got a varying level of experience in applying to grants. So I think you're all in the right place, and we'll continue on. And please, if you do have questions that come, if you do have questions that come up, please let us know. Okay. All right, now what we're going to get into is just navigating the actual application process. This is really going to be, as you think about applying to a grant, this is going to help you understand what is the material you're going to need to review as you approach this request for proposals and work on developing your proposals. So we just want to make sure you're aware of the information that exists, where it exists, so that as you leave this webinar, you can go back and have the resources in front of you, so you can do the work in order to help you develop a successful application. Next slide. This first is, essentially, this is our landing page for this inaugural request for proposals. It's the guide to the PCEF grant application process, and this page is going to contain everything you're going to need to know as you start thinking about, am I ready? Is this right for me? Next slide. And as I mentioned, you're going to have access to these slides, but I assume you all came across, you may have came across the webinars by going to this web page. But at the start of this page, there's a table of contents which just lists all the basic information that exists on this web page. It's going to be really important that as you go through this process, you go back, if you haven't already, and start at this place and read the entirety of this page. It's certainly comprehensive. It's not overly long, but it tells you all the basic information you should know about before you start digging into developing an application. Next slide. The top right of this page contains a few links that you may want to go back to over time as you work on your application. One is this section on questions about the PCEF grants. As we're doing each of these webinars each week, as well as answering questions via email, via one-on-one meetings, and other ways that we get them, we are capturing all those questions and answering those questions, and then posting those answers to those questions and that are coming through the webinars and all those other formats weekly, and we're posting those answers on Wednesdays. So this is just an important place to come back to as you think about questions that you have, or you just want to get a sense for questions other people ask, because it's become a pretty robust set of questions at this point, into week 4 of the RFP. Next slide. This just is a link to our webinars and technical assistance. I assume you may have access to this webinar through this link, but it lists the additional webinars. We'll have 2 more webinars before the close of the RFP period. And we've got 4 technical assistance and maybe more workshops. And these workshops are grant writing workshops as well as budget development workshops. So if you're thinking you want to just brush up or get a few more tips or have some other questions you're thinking about and noodling about as you think about developing your proposal, please go to this page so that you can sign up for one of the grant writing or budget development workshops. Next slide. We've got an additional set of resources. This is just a set of resources, a sort of a brief set of resources we've pulled together that lists some basic information or some just a starting place for information that could be useful for you as you think about what is climate action, energy efficiency, other funding sources, and that sort of basic information. And last but not least, we've got definitions. Now, there's a lot of terms in this RFP and in this application, and it was really important that we define those pretty clearly. So as you have questions about any terms that are coming up and that are not clear, please go to the definitions page. What you see highlighted here is a particularly important definition. Within the program and within this RFP, there are really 2 priority populations. We reference priority populations multiple times through our application in questions about who you are serving, who is working on the project, who is leading the project. And so it's just important to know there's sort of 2 groups of priority population that are called out within the program. For clean energy, green infrastructure, and regenerative agriculture projects, and these are really these are things where you're building something to benefit a group of people. The priority populations are people of color or people with low income. For workforce development and contractor training or support projects, so these are projects that are supporting the development of the workforce, the folks that are actually doing the work, not necessarily the receiving the work, but getting to do the work. The priority populations are a little broader. These are women, people of color, people with disabilities, and people who are chronically underemployed. So, so it just wasn't confusing. If folks are applying for a workforce development grant, it's important to know that there's a wider set of priority populations for those sorts of projects. Next slide. Once you've gone through that guide page and you've worked your way through and you've gotten a sense for all the basic ins and outs of the program and sort of what we're looking for, and you've decided, yes, it makes sense, the next step you do is click apply for a PCEF grant on that page, and it'll bring you to this page. Here, you're going to decide whether you're applying for some combination of a planning small or large grant, or a planning small or large grant, or multiples of those different grants. But once you decide that, you're gonna go through, next slide. And once you've made that decision, it's important that you download the application packet that is related to the grant you want to apply for. So if you're applying for multiple grants, you're going to download, a planning and a large grant. You download the application packet for a planning grant and a large grant. And we're going to go into those packets here in a little bit as Katie takes over, but it provides the basic set of information you're going to want to review and work on before you try to submit your application. So there's your application checklist, the actual application questions, and all that. So it's really important that once you've teased out what kind of grant you want to apply for, you download the application packet. And what you're going to do is once you click that link, it's going to send you to this web page, and to the top right, there's going to be a little down arrow. You see it there, that little box. That's going to allow you to download all the files. That'll let you download a zip file, and that contains everything you need to know about this RFP. And in there, it's important you start and review those materials first. Okay. And I just want to make a note. If you've already downloaded that application packet, please, we did have to make an amendment or a correction specifically for the budget template related to the small and large grants. So if you did this was updated yesterday. So if you downloaded the packet before yesterday, please go back and download either the entire folder again, or download just that attachment B. Again, this is only for the small and large grants where that change was made. And once you've downloaded that packet, it's really important that, again, we'll restate this, but you're working on all your materials in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. because once you've developed and completed your answers elsewhere, the final step in submitting your application will be going to the application portal, clicking the portal itself, clicking link, and we'll go through what that looks like, and submitting your application answers to the portal. You're not required to submit your applications to the portal. You can also email them or mail them via as a hard copy, but we certainly prefer that folks would use the portal. And similarly, in the previous slide, I acknowledged that you could download the actual application packets. If you need them printed and sent to you, we are doing mailings once a week as well. So that's just something you should email us and let us know if you need a paper copy of the application materials. Okay, next slide. So with that, I think you're all probably tired of hearing from me. I will pass this on to my colleague, Katie Lister, to carry this home.
All right. Hi, I'm Katie Lister. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of the PCEF startup team. Thanks you all for being here. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the material that Sam just mentioned that's in the application download packet. So this on this screen, this just shows kind of everything that is inside each of those application packets, for large grants up at the top, and then small grants, and then the planning grants material. When you first click on that link, you're going to see 2 folders and 3 documents. The documents that are on the outside of the file, the folders that are within, are the application questions, and that's a PDF, but it's not a fillable PDF. It just is there sort of for reference, so that you can use it to know and to see in one place what are all of the questions that you're going to need to answer and all the information that you're going to need to have to be able to enter the information into the online application portal. And then there is an application checklist, and that is exactly what it sounds like it is. It's just a checklist to make sure that you have completed everything that is required to submit an application. And then the third document there is called the Application Questions Guidance. And that document isn't necessarily meant to be read from top to bottom. It really is just a reference. It's a question by question reference that corresponds to the application question. So if you're reading a question and you're not really sure what we're looking for, or it might be helpful to have an example, or you're wondering why we're asking the question, then you can look in that application questions guidance document and just sort of have the numbers correspond, and you can find some additional guidance for each of the individual questions. Within each of the packets, then, there are 2 additional folders, the required attachments and the resources. In the required attachments, it's a little bit different between large, small, and planning. There is an attachment A, and that is the project description and scope information requirements. This again is a PDF that you are not meant to fill out and upload. It just contains all of the information that you will need to include in your project description and scope narrative. And it doesn't exist for planning documents. It's only there for for planning grants. It's only there for small and large grants. Then there is the attachment B, and that's the budget template. That's an Excel workbook, and you actually do need to download that, fill it out, and then either upload it or email it in, however you're submitting your application. But that is something that needs to be filled out in the template and then submitted with your application. That said, I mean, we hope everyone has Excel, but if you don't have access to Excel, just contact us directly and we can figure out a workaround or a fix for that. And then the third thing is attachment C, and that's the milestones and activities. And that again is an Excel workbook that you need to download, fill out, and upload. And I'll be going into a little bit more detail about those 3 specific documents in a little bit, but those are in a folder called required attachments, because they are really things that you need to be able to look at, fill out, and or understand and incorporate into your application in order to apply. They're not optional in any way. Within the resources folder, there are a number of other documents, and a lot of them kind of are just there to help you understand the program and there to help you understand what your organization is getting into. So there are a lot of the requirements. There's a sample grant agreement. There are clean energy project requirements that obviously only applies to you if you're doing a clean energy project. There are wage requirements, a sample different options for the workforce and contractor equity agreement. A lot of these requirements will become part of the contract or the grant agreement that you have with the city. So it's important to look at them, understand what they are, think about how much money it's going to cost you, how much time and money it might cost your organization to meet those requirements, and make sure that those are incorporated into your budget and incorporated into your schedule and your project work plan. One document in there is that is entire, if you're looking for things to not read, there's the greenhouse gas impact attachment, and that is really just there for people who are interested in knowing how the city is going to assess the GHG impacts of your project. There's nothing that you need to do as an applicant to assess that. We're not asking anyone to estimate their GHG impact. The city is going to do that for you. And so that's just there if you're curious and if you want to understand how we're doing it. Okay, so now for the three required, kind of going into a little bit more detail about the three required documents. The application questions are obviously required. And this is just a screenshot to show you kind of what it looks like when you open it. This is the PDF there on the left-hand side, just lists all of the application questions. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that the section numbers are the section numbers correspond, and the numbers of the questions themselves correspond to the online portal. So if you go through that document and you're working a Word document or Google Docs or whatever it is that you work in, you can just copy and paste those directly into the portal to submit the application. Attachment A is the information that needs to be included in the project description and scope section of your application. And the thing that we want to kind of point out to folks here is that there are a number of different pieces of information that are required for your application, depending on the type of project you're submitting an application for. So in the example that is on this slide, if you had a project that had a renewable energy component and also an energy efficiency component, you would need to make sure that you were including all of the information for both of those components. And we anticipate that there will be a number of projects that actually do have more than one component. The other thing that I have like to point out to people is that even though this list is kind of long looking when it first shows up on the slide, it is fairly straightforward information. It shouldn't be terribly burdensome to be able to complete. It's information that is pretty standard to that you would need to have to be able to submit a proposal. So then this is just a screenshot of attachment B, which is the budget. And just as a reminder, and for anyone who might have joined late, if you downloaded the budget before yesterday, please, for large and small grants, please do go back into through the website and download the updated version. This image is of the large and small grant application budget template. The planning template is a little bit simpler. It has fewer columns, but it has basically the same kind of categories for the rows. This is a pretty high level budget. It doesn't have a ton of detail. If you are awarded a grant as part of the sort of scope negotiation and putting the grant agreement together, we will work with grantees to more fully understand their budget and their project and their schedule and what their cash flow needs are and things like that. But for the purposes of assessing your project, we really don't need a lot of super detailed information. That said, there is a column that is called description, and we do ask that you put enough words in there to let let the reviewers kind of know what it is you're going to do with the money. And there's no word count guidance on the templates that are downloaded, and you won't be penalized for having very few words or having a ton of words in there. It is an Excel document, so you can put, you know, as many words in a cell as you want to, and we will just, you know, keep reading. But we just are letting people, encouraging people to just think about the review panel who will be assessing this and the staff who will be looking at this, and just sort of giving an idea, giving enough information that we kind of know what you're going to do with the money. So the only in these budget templates for large and small grants, there are 3 tables. There's this project budget table, which is on the screen right now. What you don't see on the screen, which is down below, is a little bit more detail. It's a personnel detail, and that feeds it. That it doesn't feed in automatically. You need to manually do it, but it's detail that should match the personnel total, which is on the project budget table. And this is just personnel for the staff that work for the applicant organization. And then there's an additional tab, and that's the leverage table. And so that is any cash or in-kind contributions that you are putting into the project to make up the total project budget. There is no leverage table for planning grants, and that's because there are no additional points that can be earned for planning grants by contributing by any leverage contributions. Also, just want to note that leverage contributions don't necessarily have to be secured. They could be claimed. So we have heard from a number of folks that it's useful to have some patient capital, or to have some first money to attract other types of grants or other sources of revenue. So definitely you don't need to have secured funds, but we do ask that people have feel generally confident that they would be able to secure funds. And also note that disbursements of PCEF funds won't happen until all of the funding, all of the financing for the project is secured. Oh, my coworker who makes all of our PowerPoints beautiful added another slide, and this is a screenshot of the planning budget. So you can see that it is a little bit simpler. So these are just some budget tips and reminders. The first one is, I think, probably the most important, and that is that we really want you to budget for what you need. PCEF is not a lowest cost wins the grant kind of program. We're really interested in nonprofits thinking about what resources they need to have to be able to make their project successful, and working that into their budget. For folks who are new to construction, we want to just put in a little reminder there to include a contingency. There is almost always a contingency line on any construction budgets. 5 to 10% is sort of like industry standard, but just want to remind people to definitely include that in your budget. If your project is multi-year, we also want to make sure that you're budgeting enough money to meet the PCEF wage requirements in all of the years that the project will be, PCEF funds will be used to pay people. So for all projects, if PCEF funds are paying staff, those staff need to earn 180% of minimum wage. And this table shows what that kind of equates to right now, but it changes every year. It's tied to a state statute. So there's a calculation, and in the resources folder within the application packet, in the wage requirements document, there's a little bit of an explanation of where you can find that and how you calculate it. So this just has the 3 years. So for example, if you had a project that was going to start in 2020, there are no projects that are going to start in 2020, but if there's a project that's going to start in 2021, but also it's going to be a 2-year project, you need to make sure that your staff are earning at least $25.20 in 2021, and then budget for enough money for them to have their earnings increase to $26.55 an hour in 2022. So because for large grants, we do have, we will have grants that could go to 5 years. We just really want to make sure that people are budgeting for increases in the salaries of their staff so that they meet those minimum wage requirements. So then just a few notes to pay attention to the caps. There is a 20% cap on overhead. That's 20% of the project cost. If you're applying through a fiscal sponsor, there's a cap of 10% on the fiscal sponsor fee. And in those situations, for folks who are applying with a fiscal sponsor, the combined fee plus the overhead cannot exceed 25% of total project cost. And there are, within the templates, there are some formulas in there. Please don't edit them. There's some formulas in there that should give you an error message if you put in amounts that don't, follow these rules. Also just wanted to note that the total construction budget on and this is just for clean energy projects, but for non-energy related building improvements, the cap on that is 30%. And Janet just put a note in the chat box that said the increase takes place on July 1st. So staff may have a rate in January through June that changes July to December and then through next June. So that is an important reminder. It changes on the state fiscal year. So depending on kind of how your organization budgets, you might need to just make sure you keep track of that. And then also just wanted to note that grantees can be paid through reimbursement or through partial advance options. In the resources folder, application packet, there's a sample grant agreement that gives a little bit more detail about kind of what those fund disbursement options might look like. And our intention is to work with grantees when we're negotiating the final grant agreement to make sure to come up with, a payment option that works that doesn't create kind of cash flow problems for the grantee and works for the city kind of administratively and from a risk management perspective. So this is an abbreviated list of what is a longer list on the landing page that Sam kind of started his presentation with. So if you go to the website and you go to the apply for a piece, you go to the guide to applying for a PCEF grant, where there's all of that information. There is a section in there called uses of funds. And when we send out the follow-up email after this webinar, and it's also posted on our this PowerPoint will also be posted on our website. You can just follow the link at the top of this slide. And that goes to, and then you'll be able to see a little bit more detail about each of these bullet points related to uses of funds. And so we're calling this out here just because it has an impact on your budget development. And we just want to make sure that folks know both what is allowed and what the limitations are. This list is not comprehensive by any means. These are really just things that we wanted to shine a light on because they include some eligible funding or eligible expenses that are not necessarily typical eligible expenses for climate programs. And so we want to make sure that people know that they are in fact eligible expenses so that they can work them into their budgets. And also a few limitations so that people don't work those things into their budgets. So we're calling attention to these elements, like the slide said, just so that you all will know what is allowed and what is limited, and be encouraged to really think creatively about how to meet the environmental, racial, and social justice goals of the program. So the only other thing I'll say about this list is that there are a number of things on here that I think without context kind of make people go, huh? And it's important to remember that they all have to be a cost associated with a project that addresses climate change and advances racial and social justice. So for example, land acquisition could be an eligible expense if you had a community solar project and you needed a place to put all of the solar panels. Then that land could potentially be a project cost because it's absolutely necessary. It's an integral part of a project that addresses climate. addresses climate change. Sorry, earbuds falling out. So the last attachment here, or this is the last document that is in that required documents folder in the application packet, and that's attachment C, the milestones and activities. And this is an Excel document that, again, does not have word count guidance, and we just encourage people to use as many words as they think they need to help us understand what the milestones and activities associated with your project are. We have some definitions here, and these are also in the template itself of what a milestone is and what an activity is. A milestone is a significant marker in a project that indicates completion of a major event, decision point, stage, or goal. And the activities are really the things that you need to do to be able to achieve that milestone. The definition of milestone has some pretty subjective terms in it. And that's really because as the applicant, it's up to you to tell us what is significant and what you consider to be major. One thing that I like to remind folks in these webinars is that I think is useful as you're filling this out to think about what you might be reporting on, because it is likely that if you are awarded funds, one of the things that the PCEF staff who will meet with you to negotiate the final grant agreement will be looking for when they're talking with you about specific reporting requirements for your project, they will probably look to this document for guidance on that. So just something to think about while you're filling that out. And then there's the application portal, which should hopefully be pretty straightforward and easy to use. And I just have a few screenshots of it. I think most folks are probably familiar with these things. You do need to have a login. It's easy to get. So it's, if you don't have a login already, you can click the link that says create a login. One thing that is important to remember on this is that you can save and come back. So you can save your work and then come back to it and finish it later. The screenshot that's kind of in the background here is an example of what a dashboard might look like for somebody who has 3 different applications that are in process. And so they're each, given a unique identifier. You can give each of them a title so that you can keep track of which of your applications are for which things. But only one person can be in the application portal editing at a time, and there can only be one set of login credentials associated with that application. So if you have multiple people working on a project, you're going to need to share that login information, and you're also just going to need to coordinate so that you don't, so that you're not both accidentally in there at the same time working on something, because the system might save one set of changes and not another set of changes, and so don't want you to waste time and lose work that way. So I think just also kind of like a good reason to really get all of your application material ready ahead of time in whatever software you're used to working in Word or in Google Docs or Excel documents, and then save, once it's done, to save it and paste it into the application portal. I always think another really good reason is that there's no spell check in the application portal, so we definitely want to do that ahead of time. This is just another screenshot that shows each of the sections. So as you're filling them out, you just kind of hit save at the bottom and move on to the other sections. You don't necessarily have to fill them out in order, but you do need to put something into one of the sections and then hit save in order to create that application. So you just probably, when you go in, when you're ready to start, at least go in and put a title in to the section 1 of the application information, and then hit save, and then it will be there ready for you. And then you can do the different sections in whatever order makes sense. So I think we probably said all of these application portal tips already, but I'll just repeat them because they are important. This is really the last step. We do want everyone to download and review the material, complete the application before they get started in the portal. It's not really designed to be a collaborative workspace, and is going to be sort of a little bit clunkier than software that you're used to. So we strongly recommend that you use kind of more standard software to develop your material. You can apply for multiple grant projects under one account, but you'll need to, like I said, share the login information if more than one person is working on it. Just like with anything, we encourage people to save their application from time to time during completion. I know as more of us kind of get used to working on Office 365, we have stopped remembering to hit save as often as we used to when things didn't save automatically. But the portal does not save automatically, so it's a good idea to just hit save from time to time. And then, like I said, if you're sharing login information, you can't use the application portal at the same time as one of your collaborators. And those are all of our slides. And so now we would just like to open it up to Q&A. You can put your questions into the chat box, or if you want to say them out loud, you can use the raise hand function and turn off your microphone. It's like we have one question from Russell, and that is, would a pilot project fit better as a planning grant or a small project grant? I think it depends on what kind of pilot it was. And Sam, I would ask you to kind of chime in here too, but I would note that you should look at the material that is related to planning grants and kind of review what the eligible types of activities are. Planning grants can't pay for implementation, and so if you have a pilot project that includes actually like doing a thing or building a thing, then that would not be an eligible expense for the planning.
That's right. I don't have any more to add to that. I think that's the mark. I mean, we understand. I mean, planning grants inherently are a grant so that you can focus on planning, and we don't, and it's evident in the application because we don't ask as many detailed questions, and so we want folks. And it was a signal. We want folks to be able to plan their projects and have resources to plan and thoughtfully develop their projects. But the small and large grants, those have more questions. But we also expect that not every detail is squared away, so you can always do a little planning as part of your small or large grant. It's just that's not the focus of the work. The focus is implementing the project itself. So right. We know that there's always a scoping element as part of any project too.
It looks like Suzanne has a question but doesn't have a raised hand function. Suzanne, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sure can. Yeah, sorry, I'm typing furiously trying to figure out how to ask this question.
Yeah, no worries.
So I have a project that's going to have multiple types of categories that would fall into. It's going to have energy efficiency and workforce development, and we're going to plant some trees. And how do I let you know what we think it is, and how are you going to identify, like, how do you break up those percentages so that it makes sense to the people who are going to be evaluating?
Well, that is a good question, Suzanne. I would say, Sam, it looks like you have something to say. Do you want to?
If you have, I have an answer, but I'll go for it, Katie.
That's okay. I always look at Sam when he's leaning in. So why don't you start with your answer, and then I'll.
There is a checkbox at the top of each of the applications that says what kind of grant, and you can check each of those, right? You can check each of those. I think the expectation we have is those are rough allocations, and so generally programmatically we're tracking the allocations of whether we're hitting 40 to 60%, 10 to 15% for green infrastructure. We're tracking that over a 3-year cycle. So we will come back and ask for more resolution and say, okay, approximately you've checked off a project, and that's okay that it's multiple things, and we may make so that the committee is able to generally understand what they're seeing. We may make some approximations. We don't expect to fall neatly, and those bounds are 40 to 60. We don't expect to fall neatly on any of those lines. And so it's something that we will be tracking over time to report how are we doing in meeting the initiative's intent in funding across those categories. But it's not crucial that we have exact percentages at this phase of the application. We just want to know which of these things are you doing, so that what we're doing is we're looking at your scope, and there are that attachment A that has there is different bits of information depending on the type of project you're doing that we will want to see. So it's less important that we have the precise number in my mind around sort of the dollars and the apportioning, as opposed to the right contextual information in your scope. Does that help?
Great. Any other questions?
Sorry, one more, just technical.
Yeah.
When we're uploading documents, can we upload an Excel spreadsheet, or is it got to be a PDF?
No, you can upload. When I tested the portal, I tried many different kinds of files, and I was not able to find one that I couldn't upload. So yeah, you can upload images, Excel, PDF, Word.
What?
This is a question from Jennifer, and that is funding for a project economic feasibility study part of the scope in a planning grant? And so is that a question about the economic feasibility of a project? If so, then the answer is absolutely yes. I think that could absolutely be part of the planning grant.
And Jennifer, Kate, I should let you. I just unmuted Jennifer in case you want to answer.
Oh, okay.
Or you wanted to follow up verbally.
Yeah, is my mic working now? It wasn't earlier today.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm asking about funding for hiring a third-party organization to perform a economic feasibility study for a project, and that seems to fit the scope in a planning grant as it was described. I just wanted to ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're gonna hang here until other questions come up. At least for a good while, a little bit longer, and then if it's entirely crickets, we will certainly let you all go. And then just as a reminder, this is the 4th webinar we've hosted. We are obviously at the halfway point, but every Wednesday you'll see, and we just posted, all the questions so far. We posted them either yesterday evening or this morning, all the questions that have come up through these webinars on the website. So that's also just another place, and it's worthwhile because I will acknowledge great questions have come up, and we certainly could not answer every question in advance. So it's worth going to those questions and seeing if any of those are things you may be thinking about, because we've made sure to at least let you all know on a consistent way the things that we're answering for others.
And I would also, and I do see that Russell has a question, but I would just add to that if you have a question after this webinar, just email us. There is the Clean Energy Fund at Portland, Oregon. .gov, that general delivery email box. You can send questions in there, and we will answer them. So the question from Russell is, how big is the PCEF staff? How many different people might we be dealing with? So I'm counting. There are.
We're 6 now. By the end of this process, awarding grants and whatnot, we'll get to 12. And Katie, you might have a better sense of how many folks we'll be dealing with.
I would, and I would also though just note that if you are awarded a grant, you will be assigned a project manager, and so that will be the PCEF staff person who will be responsible for helping you ensure that your project is successful and kind of facilitating whatever, you know, documents need to be submitted or communication needs to happen. So hopefully ease, you know, eliminate confusion and ease communication that way.
I have a question. I hope I don't get too much into the weeds, but it has to do with this. We're doing construction rehabilitation work, and there's a 30% that is for non-energy efficiency construction. One of the questions you have on the frequently asked questions, or whatever you're calling that document, has to do with the creation of a roof if somebody's going to be putting in solar. And it sounded like the roof would have to be part of that 30%. Part of my concern with that is, how do I know what would qualify as energy efficiency and what would qualify as not energy efficiency? You know, if I'm doing walls and I'm putting insulation in, do the walls count? You know, I don't know how to make that calculation.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, and definitely one that you would need to work with your contractor on. But and when we kind of, you know, there's a technical review part of the process that you know, we will be sort of leaning on some building science folks too. But I would say that, you know, if you are insulating, if you are, you know, increasing the R value of your walls, then removing the sheetrock, putting in the insulation, the vapor barrier, and putting up new sheetrock would all be part of the energy efficiency project. But if you were doing and like adding 10 square feet, and so you had to extend the wall, then the sort of like that new, this sort of the expansion might not necessarily, you would need to sort of cap the costs associated with that. I don't know that there's a really like simple answer, just because there's so many different scenarios, especially with rehab, that I don't know we could give you like a really very satisfactory simple answer on that one.
Yeah.
And the example concerned me though, because there are instances where you can take a roof from being extremely energy inefficient to being much more energy efficient. And that was one of the things I was thinking we might be able to use. But if roofs are considered part of the 30%, we might not be able to do roofs then. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that there are a couple of different things. If I'm recalling that question correctly, it was for a solar install. And so the person was thinking they're going to do a solar install and they need a new roof because it doesn't like meet the code to hold the number of solar panels that they're going to put up there or something. That improvement, that building improvement would need to be part of the 30% cap. But if you are increasing the efficiency of the roof and doing anything that is the efficiency improvement, so I think that it's not as cut and dry. It's not that roofs are out per se. It's just that it has to be. There are things that you would sort of do with a roof that would be increasing the increasing efficiency, like improving the airflow or increasing the insulation, but then there's also just kind of like structural stuff that is just like roof stuff and is not energy related.
Yeah, these are never, I mean, the reality, I think Kay said it, they're hard lines to draw. And I mean, the reality is the program is about, you know, reducing greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency, renewable energy, you know, green infrastructure, those investments. So we you know, those case by case will come up. But Suzanne, if you have more, if there's a specific, if it's a program and you're addressing multiple buildings, you'll have to take a programmatic approach. But if it's a singular building, we can also get more into the specific of the project. I would say we can follow up, but programmatically, we know that you won't know what you're going to have to do in every single building, but we don't expect folks to know exactly what they're going to do, but their general approach. So that you recognize once you get into an individual building, you're going to have to do something different here or there, but sort of what's your approach, and we expect you to sort of carry that in, obviously, into your budgeting and everything else. In terms of the systems you're looking at, and all that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Great. So I
Carolyn.
was confused about the slide that said something about that the cap on the total construction budget is 30%. Are you saying, so we're affordable housing developers, and how I would want to use this is to sort of roll this into a larger project. So can the rest of the budget only be, anyway, can you explain what that means?
So this is, if you have, so actually I'm going to go back, if you hopefully still have your slides up. This is related to the total budget, this is related to the total construction budget coming from PCEF funds. So if you're using PCEF funds to supplement like a much bigger project that has a whole bunch of others, that's not the construction budget we're talking about.
Okay.
We're just talking about the PCEF dollars going to construction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks.
Maybe, Sam, we can do the exit poll before we lose. And
Yes, thank you. Let's do it.
And we're happy to wait, you know, to wait if anyone be here if anyone has more questions. But
so I'm going to launch, just so that we can get a little feedback from you all, at least in real time. We're going to launch this poll real quick, just to get a sense for how useful this webinar was and how likely you are to apply for funds this year. So we're not going to leave after this. You don't have to go, not yet. But just love a little feedback before we do lose you. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results. It looks like, fortunately, this is useful, folks, and there's a good mix of folks' aptitude for applying this year. Okay. So we're going to linger here for a little longer. You know, we've talked about this before that, you know, if we were obviously pre-COVID, we'd be, you know, everyone get to mingle afterwards, and, you know, we might even turn on some music. So I said this to June in the we had a webinar yesterday evening that I would set up, I would set the music up. So I've realized I can't do it now, Katie, because you're sharing, but next one, I'm going to play some music.
You can be in charge, yes.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll just mention for the folks still on the line, tomorrow, tomorrow the 15th, from noon to 2 o'clock is the grant writing training for anyone who's interested in that. You can sign up for that through our website. We can't get you cookies, but we can get you a training.
I think you might have been offering cookies.
Yeah. That's a good point. Janet just put into the chat that the trainings are also recorded. So if you can't make it, the recordings of those are posted on our website.
Okay, just because you guys, you know, given us time, so it's making me think of other things. For the portion, okay, let's assume we get awarded a grant and we're working on a reimbursement. I'm working with various contractors. Does all the funding filter through me to them, or is there any possibility of having them get reimbursement from you?
I don't know that we have conceptualized making payments directly to vendors, but I think that could be something that we would need to discuss as staff, and if you feel that would be really beneficial in some way. We, I think, had always conceptualized passing the funds through the grant, through the grantee, and then having you make payments directly to the vendors, your subcontractors.
Yeah, one of the problems we've had with other city is the reimbursement can take a really long time. And so I'll be working with a general contractor who's also a nonprofit organization, who will be working with subcontractors to actually be doing the work. And if they're submitting invoices to the nonprofit and then that nonprofit is sending it to us and then we're sending it to the city, there is a pretty significant lag time. And so when we were originally conceiving of this within our group, we thought it would be easier for the funds to go, especially for paying for the subcontractors, to go through the general contractor.
That's a comment. Yeah, we need to have that. We need to have that conversation internally. There's some, functionally, there's probably some legal questions we have to ask internally in terms of the legal relationships, but then just we've got, so it's a great question, Suzanne, so we'll certainly ask about it. The reality is a lot of those conversations and negotiations will happen once you've been awarded a grant in terms of teasing out what's an appropriate disbursement schedule approach. And so unless this is something that'll impact your thinking on your budget, if it's something that would impact the way you budget for the project, then we'll move quicker in terms of teasing out that answer. So I just want to maybe I'll ask it directly. Is that a question you want to get answered sooner?
So I think so long as we're flexible, where it would look different is the budget specifically calls out contractor line versus our direct line. And if we're doing the actual paying of all the different subcontractors, then it would take more time on our part. Otherwise, we would make that part of the contractor line because they would actually be taking the time. And we've talked to them about both options. We didn't know what the rules were going to be. But so long as it's flexible, once we get into the discussion part of, creating the contract, we'll be fine. And we're going to be charging the same amount for our time as they would be for their time.
Gotcha. Yep. In terms of moving it to one line versus the other. Yep. I think that's within reason. That's certainly flexible. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got Suzanne, we've got you and Russell here, so you got us. All right. Sounds like you might have some music over there. Oh, it's just here. That's good. Well, if that's it, then I think as Katie noted, we're here, and just let us know if you have any questions. Follow up via email, and we're pretty good about getting back, particularly in this window. So we're pretty good about making sure we strive to get back with folks within 24 hours. So please just let us know, and we're certainly here, and good luck in the last month as you all crank out and bring these proposals home. So we're really excited, and we're happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all. I'm gonna end the meeting. Thank you to Patty, our captioner, and we'll see y'all soon.